What is up everyone, it's Saber here and welcome to another Naruto What If. If you end up liking the video, please consider subscribing. It's free and you can take it back at any time and it really helps me out, and this is my third channel, so if you want some more what ifs, go check out my other channels. And with all of the YouTube formalities out of the way, let's get into it. He sat there in the small Spartan room, his mind racing with emotions, thoughts, memories, everything. He closed his eyes. He was Hyuga Neji, a prodigious member of the branch family Hyuga clan of Konohagakure no Sado. Something fate had chosen. He decided that he was an arrogant little boy. He took in a deep breath, his mind processing the information of the host's life, and what he found thoroughly angered him. He rubbed his forehead, his hubris, an angry mind giving him a headache when his fingers brushed against the bandages wrapped around his head, making contact with something. He snapped. His tenketsu burned as his chakra flared, the incredible energy running throughout his coils like a raging waterfall. The white walls around him cracked ever so slightly, the floor beneath him shattering. His white orbs snapped onto a mirror to his right. Taking not another moment, he rushed to the reflective surface, ripping the bandages that hid it. When the green mark was visible to him, he went deathly still. One look at the monstrosity and he knew exactly what it was, and when he knew, he could almost laugh. Someone dared mark him, someone dared cage him with something so sinister. No, they would not. He was not a bird to be imprisoned. This mark was put upon an innocent child, and for what the memories began to fill his mind again, and those memories angered him even more. A tall, powerful looking man with humble grace held him, tears streaking his face, his shoulders shaking. He said that he had to, that it was for the best for the village and the precious clan. He held him tight, not wanting to let go, knowing that this man, as his father, would never come back from wherever it was he was going. He cried. The man who shared his father's face looked down at him, his eyes holding something his childish mind couldn't quite understand. The man nodded his head to the woman behind him, signaling for her to do something. That's when his head ached like white hot fire was set to his brain, his eyes shut tight. Out of pain, he cried. His father hadn't returned, and he now knew he never would. To save the life of the man who shared his father's face, to save her father, has had to die. His father was sacrificed, sent off to die in another country. All alone, he was forsaken, but it mattered little since he was a branch family member. He shared his father's suffering. He was all alone. He cried. He was sparing against her, against the girl who had it all. She was so pathetic. It was sad. Her weak footwork and stance was almost sickening to him. She was so powerless. So why was it that she was given everything he wasn't? Why wasn't she branded like he was? Why was her father still alive? In a fit of jealous rage, he dropped the illusion that she was his equal and struck her with extra force, sending her to the ground. He rushed at her again, ready to deliver another blow, but was then stopped by all-encompassing pain. The mark on his forehead activated, sending pain no one could withstand into his head. He fell to his knees, clutching his head in an attempt to stay the pain. It didn't work. He cried. The room now shook in horror at the weight and pressure of the chakra being forced upon it. His chakra screamed, his mind a jumbled mess. He couldn't think straight anymore. He knew what was happening, but he couldn't stop it. He was scared. He needed someone he could trust, someone he knew would protect him. He managed to slide his fingers against the blood that seeped from his mouth, his teeth biting his lip, and brushed it against the floor, creating the kanji for brother. And then the distraught Neji vanished in a cyan light. Naruto's eyes snapped open when he felt the oh so familiar chakra signature wash over a part of the village. He had been sleeping in his sorry excuse for a home when he felt something he yearned for since his arrival. He could feel his light, his brother. He pushed the covers of his bed aside, jumping to his feet in confusion and excitement. He rushed to put on his sandals when, without warning, a cyan light appeared in his kitchen, which would have blinded anyone else. The light lasted for a moment before fading. Naruto waited for the light to completely vanish before he hesitantly took a small step forward, holding his breath. He then was met with a face he didn't know, but with his eyes there was no doubt who this person was. Himura, he whispered to the boy, who was obviously a Hyuga Neji, turned to the voice calling his name, a name only his brother could know. Even through the pain and suffering he was experiencing right now, he could tell that this blonde-haired boy was somehow his Nissan. He was Hagoromo, and Nissan, he whispered back breathlessly. He opened his mouth once again, but was cast into unconsciousness, his mind overloading with too much emotion and information. Naruto's eyes widened. Himura, he shouted, rushing his brother, embracing him. Itachi slid out of bed, a good night's rest causing his conditioned body to feel as if he could take the entire village in a battle royal. He chuckled to himself. That was one of Naruto-san's how to save Konoha schemes, which after half a minute was completely dismissed. He stretched before dressing in his usual civilian clothes. Today was his first day off he'd had in months, with his Uchiha responsibilities, his ANBU duties, and training to prepare with Naruto. He was a busy man. He wore his long-sleeved dark blue shirt, his black pants, and shinobi sandals. A weapons pouch was attached to his hip. No matter where he was, a shinobi was Never unarmed even though he had his eyes, he was never an arrogant person. He knew that he couldn't depend on the Sharingan all the time. He was ready for any and all contingencies, all but one. He reached out to his door ready to greet his family before taking a walk with Sasuke. When he vanished from his room embracing his brother, he couldn't help but shake. Someone from his era, someone so close to him, was finally reunited with him. He had felt so lonely here in this time, and even with Itachi and his mortal parents he was so confused, so unsure of what should be done. He was flirting with extremely frightening ideas, and no one could truly see why. None of these people had seen what the world had been like before the shinobi corruption. There had been war, pain and suffering, yes, but all that ended when he brought peace and order to the lands. He had given them their answer, the key to harmony, and they only used it to harm the delicate balance of the world. It was so infuriating and heartbreaking all at the same time, and he needed help with his brother lying in his arms, his familiar chakra almost resonating with his own. He was so overjoyed that he couldn't even speak. He just let his exhausted brother slumber, holding him, protecting him from the world. He missed him so much. They just stayed like that for the entire night, Naruto waiting patiently for his brother, his light, to wake. They had much to discuss. Itachi was surprised for all but 3 seconds before his calculative mind processed his surroundings and those present. He just shook his head and sighed, his ever stoic expression greeting a curious Naruto and a Hyuga boy he wasn't familiar with sitting at Naruto's kitchen table. Naruto gestured for Itachi to sit with them, and Itachi obeyed, taking a seat, and seeing how comfortable Naruto was around the Hyuga child, he decided to speak openly. "How am I here?" He wasn't sure, but it almost felt as if he was. "I summoned you," Naruto replied, seeing the questioning look on Itachi's face. He elaborated. "Chikishoto," he stated like it was the most normal thing in the world. "The animal path of the Rinnegan allows me to summon beast and man alike." As Itachi nodded, taking a seat, he couldn't help but wonder why he was being gazed at by the Hyuga boy like he had a second head. "So this is one of them?" The pale-eyed boy finally spoke, the last word of his sentence being said with venom. Itachi raised an eyebrow, not sure what the boy meant by them. Naruto, seeing the tension in the room, decided to ease it. "Calm yourself, Niji." He still wasn't used to calling his brother by a different name. "Itachi is like us, a seeker of peace." The now named Niji just huffed his mind, still not sure of the older boy. "We shall see," Niji replied. He folded his arms, allowing his brother to continue. "Something," the blonde began, "amazing happened last night, my little dragon." Itachi could see Niji's eyes narrow slightly at the affectionate nickname he was given. Naruto pointed to Niji, a wide smile marring his face. "My brother has returned, reincarnated into a body of this era like me." Immediately Itachi snapped his eyes on the boy. He sat with a slightly shocked look in his eyes. "You mean," he began. "Yes," Naruto finished for his friend. "This is Himura, my twin." Itachi just stared at the Hyuga boy, wonder in his eyes not missing when Niji gave a small, almost unnoticeable proud smile at his brother's words. "How?" Itachi asked. Naruto opened his mouth to speak, but Niji cut him off. "It doesn't matter how," he said with barely contained rage. "What does matter is why he stood. We leave this world to let humanity live on their own 2 feet, and what do they do?" Niji was practically seething. "You people corrupt our teachings, our ideals. You bring war back to what was a peaceful world, and for what?" He shook his head. "This is no longer our world, brother. This is the shinobi's world, and I want nothing to do with it." After Niji had finally awoken from his slumber, Naruto began to summarize what he learned since his time back in the impure world, and with the memories of his already developed host, he was able to piece together a puzzle that thoroughly disgusted him. Shinobi ninjutsu were the treatment of his brother's creations. Everything was just so wrong, so molested to him. Shinobi were nothing but a twisted, sickening plague, something to be eradicated from the land, something akin to a demon, the life of a killer. A murderer was not a life worth living, and that's exactly what Niji thought of shinobi. Worthless, they were beings of chaos and darkness, and he couldn't wait for his brother to give him the command to wash them away with all the powers he possessed. Ninjutsu had almost been as terrible a thing as the shinobi who created it, and he would gladly rip his eyes from his skull before he practiced the corrupted form of his brother's religion. Ninshu was sacred, something not to be muddied by foul, treacherous fools. Yet again humanity had proved their wickedness, shown their true colors, and polluted the religion they spent so long to spread to the people, to the weak. Ninshu was created to mold humanity into harmony so that there was no class system. The weak would have a voice among the strong, and men, women, and children would walk as one. Ninshu was unity, global unity. Ninjutsu was its ugly counterpart. It was a tool for insurrection. It was a betrayal. War was something he was familiar with, having ended all of them with his brother in their original era. He had worked side by side with Hagoromo for years to bring order to mortals, ending all battles between them. It was no easy task, and it wasn't an overnight occurrence, so to hear about all the wars and battles fought between shinobi, between clans, made him furious. Mortals seemed to actively seek conflict, pain, and suffering. It was ridiculous. His brother's creations were like family, and when it was explained to him that the 9 children created to safeguard humanity from demonic and divine alike who were caged imprisoned by mortals and used as tools in a war they had nothing to do with. He wished for the heavens and hells to crush them all. He lost all sympathy, all hope for the inferior species. He no longer wished to carry the mantle of protector. He was done with humanity. Again Neji stopped Naruto from speaking. No, he shouted. They don't deserve our help, Hagoromo. They have welcomed, damn near embraced this twisted way of life, and you know this to be true. He gave his brother a knowing look. You may wear a different face, but do not forget that with my eyes I can see your soul, and I can see that you know I speak the truth. He looked to Itachi, not caring if he had similar goals as he once had. You've sealed your fate, mortal, he continued. Itachi felt uneasy with those rage-filled orbs staring at him, and for good reason. Naruto felt his brother send massive amounts of chakra to his eyes, and saw a cyan glow begin to shine around his form. Invisible to all but his eyes, he was planning on using that. Itachi knew all of Konoha would fall by his hand if he used that. It all happened so fast, chakra on a scale so large, so titanic, that instead of shaking buildings, cracked walls and shattered floors, everything was just silent, still frozen. There was no sound, no mighty flare or arrogant show of power. There was nothing to prove that the presence of a god had appeared in the village. Hidden in tree leaves, there was no speedy reaction, no god tier match of skills, nothing. All that changed was Neji's eyes locked upon Naruto's, and all hate, all malice, all negative emotions simply vanished. Banished from the home of the Kyuubi child, Itachi had finally seen what his friend was capable of, and he now knew that during their spars Naruto had let him win, because with that amount of chakra alone he could probably take on the entirety of the elemental nations, and for the first time in his life Itachi feared the power of another man. The room of beginnings was a wholly untainted dimension created by Otsutsuki Hagoromo to practice his more terrifyingly destructive techniques. It is the place the holy sage gave form to the 9 bijou before breathing life into them. It was the one place no one could gain entrance to without permission, since it was a dimension that existed within the mind of the eldest son of the rabbit goddess. Not even Kami could force her way in, and she was omnipotent. It is also the place Hagoromo and Himura went to settle matters of conflict between the two. They seldom had such conflicting opinions, but the only way they could truly understand one another was when they traded blows without the fear of death or injury. It was the one time they used violence to bring about peace, and that was the very reason why the two were in the room of beginnings. Now their host bodies, looking at one another with silent understanding and activated Byakugan, stared at the powerful Rinnegan. Indignation and contempt towards humanity in the former, serenity and content in what was still a mystery in the latter. In a blink of an eye, what had been Uzumaki, Naruto and Hyuga Neji gazing at one another was now Hagoromo and Himura in their eras, adult bodies holding their respective shakujo. The room of beginnings was a place time had no meaning. Humanity is no longer what it used to be, Hagoromo Himura stated. He called his brother by his name only when he was upset, and right now he was furious. Hagoromo sighed. No, brother, they are exactly what they used to be. He began, much to the confusion of his twin. Humanity has always relished in the capital vices: lust, greed, gluttony, pride, envy, sloth, and wrath. We've always known this. He chuckled. Wasn't it you to dub it the 7 deadly sins of humanity? He saw the pointed look his brother shot him, silently asking the relevance of his statement. Humanity has never been a peaceful species. War and conflict has always plagued them, even before Mother came to the realm of mortal life. Himura looked to his right in a rare show of discomfort. They had long ago learned of their mother's origin, and it was something they tried to ignore and keep a secret. What is the point of lecturing me in the ways of mortal existence? Himura asked. He was so irritated, so uncalm, that he couldn't keep his mind clear. The point, brother, is that humanity hasn't changed. They haven't undergone an evolution of any kind. He looked to his hands, the hands of Otsutsuki Hagoromo. It is we who have changed. Himura narrowed his eyes. Just because we reside in the bodies of children doesn't mean we are any different than we used to be. Therefore your statement is moot. Humanity has changed. He knew he was being stubborn, but that too was moot at the moment. I do not speak of our bodies, Himura, I speak of our methods. His brother looked to him like he was crazy. Hagoromo just sighed before continuing. We brought peace and order to humanity, yes, but we also abandoned them. He saw his brother open his mouth to defend their actions, but stopped him with a wave of his hand. We weren't wrong in our actions, brother, we were wrong in our faith. Himura noticed his brother give a slightly dark expression. We believed that humanity was ready for independence. We thought if we gave them the tools they could create harmony. We mistook amelioration for peace, for an insatiable appetite for power and subjugation. Himura couldn't tell if his brother was still trying to defend humanity or slander them. How does this change our methods? He asked. His brother wasn't making any sense. Do not stand there and pretend to be anything but a bringer of peace. Himura, it's below you. Hagoromo began. It is an out genetic coding to protect, to safeguard. Again Himura looked uncomfortable when he brought up their origins. You feel hurt, betrayed, angry. He continued. I know exactly how you feel. I felt the same when I was brought back, but that doesn't mean my purpose in life changes. He steeled himself, saying the words that were considered taboo for them. Project cometh peace, okay, he shouted, unable to hear anymore. Okay, he whispered in a breathless tone with his head hung low. We have been betrayed, there is no doubt in that, but if we resort to revenge like you were about to, we would be no better than them. He saw his brother flinch at his words. That is not our way, and I refuse to become tainted by the darkness that follows vengeance. So what would you have me do? Hamura shouted. His emotions and thoughts were so jumbled that he wished she was by his side. That is where our methods change, little brother. He gave his other half a serious look. And it is also where I desperately need your help. His serious expression turned worried. Thoughts the likes of which I have never even fathomed have been racing through my mind. And they scare me, Hamura. He shook his head. No, they terrify me. Hamura blinked at his brother's expression. Never before witnessing such alarm on his face. His brother was invincible. Nothing scared him, right? Please explain. He finally spoke. Hagoromo sighed, folding his legs in midair where he began to hover like it was normal. I look at our accomplishments, our supposed legacy, and I can't help but think we failed. We did what we set out to do. It was humanity that failed us, not us them. Hamura interrupted, an incredulous look marring his face. Hagoromo shook his head. I don't think we can truly say we brought about peace, because peace is everlasting. Our peace was little more than an illusion, our belief in our ability to mold the future, a delusion of grandeur. He tightened his grip on his shakujo. We were naive, and it caused a lot of strife. Hamura shook with fury. A delusion of grandeur. The air felt heavy. Ninshu was true enlightenment, a gift to attain harmony for all living life. How could we predict just how powerful the greed of mortals could be? I agree, Hamura. Hagoromo replied, slightly shocking and very much confusing him, but I will not abandon them, and neither will you. It's in our blood to help the innocent. The first don't believe humanity is innocent, Hamura said in a calm seriousness. They are all guilty of a mortal sin. With that disposition, Lilith would faster than a fraction of a second. Hamura was upon him, his shakujo poised to strike. A look of utter rage and madness was on his otherwise stoic face. Hamura was outraged. Hagoromo raised his own shakujo to block the incoming swing, his eyes widening when the strength behind the attack met him. His brother wasn't holding back. When the black staves met, an explosion from the pressure erupted, the entire surrounding area heating up exponentially. After the steam finally faded, Hamura gave his brother a look of utter rage. Do not speak as if you know anything about her, brother, he warned in a low voice that promised pain. Hagoromo took in a deep breath, finally realizing what needed to be done. His brother was reincarnated into a host that was practically the embodiment of vanity. He would not listen because he couldn't. He was like an Uchiha. He smirked. He had made the ironically blind clan of Sharingan users see his way. A Hyuga was child's play. He let loose his breath. 5 seconds had passed with Naruto just staring into Niji's eyes, the two unmoving for the short amount of time before they both suddenly blinked, looking at Itachi like nothing had transpired at all. Niji sighed. I am sorry, Itachi. He surprised the young Uchiha. I was not myself. He nodded his head in the closest thing to a bow he could come to. Itachi just shook his head. You have nothing to apologize for, Niji-san, he replied. If I were in your position, I'd very well wish to lash out at the ones who betrayed me. He understood the man from another time. Niji just raised an eyebrow, smirking. There may be hope in humanity at Hagoromo, he commented. The blonde beside him sighed. My name is Naruto now, brother Naruto. You can't go around speaking my real name. People will think you mental. He chuckled at his words. Niji gave him an amused look. I just can't understand why anyone would name their child fish cake. It was true, he couldn't comprehend the reasoning for that. Naruto crossed his arms in mild irritation, puffing his lower lip out a little. It also means maelstrom, he pouted softly. This in turn only added to the amusement of his pale-eyed brother. Of course it does, Nisan, Niji replied. I take it everything is settled then? Itachi asked. Will you help us in our mission to save the world? Niji smiled at the boy. He could tell why his brother was so fond of him. Yes, he began, I will aid you in the saving of the world. He never really put it like that, and he found it sounded a little silly, but he went with it for simplicity's sake. If anything, Itachi gave one of his rare smiles mirrored by the younger boys in the apartment. Good, Itachi said. Now we commit high treason. He let loose his breath. Niji watched as Tomo slowly appeared on the rings of his brother's Rinnegan, and gone was his anger, replaced by slight fear. In the progenitor of the Rinnegan and Sharingan, in the blink of an eye, Hagoromo was behind him, his right arm encased in mechanical armor due to Shirado as Azura path. With his Byakugan, Hamura could see that the mechanized limb was flooding with chakra. Before he could react or process anything else, he was hit in the back with the force of an exploding volcano. It hurt. He was launched a great distance away, the power behind the blow mightier than anything he'd ever felt before. Not wasting any time, Hagoromo was upon his brother once more, slamming his body into the ground before he could land. If I have to beat some sense into you, I will, Hagoromo stated coldly. Hamura rose from the place he was smashed into, dusting his long white robes. Even though things like dust and dirt did not exist in the room of beginnings, you cannot make me see whatever it is you wish for me to see. Hagoromo Hamura began flaring his chakra in a fashion that would let him let loose some Of his stronger techniques, humanity hasn't committed a venial sin, they are guilty of mortal sins, and not just one or two. He raised his hand holding up a single finger. One, he began the corruption of ninju. Ninjutsu isn't inherently evil, brother Hagoromo tried but was totally ignored by him, holding up a second finger. Hamura continued. 2, he started these world wars. The shinobi are so fond of a third finger. Rose 3, this time his eyes shimmered with something akin to murder. The treatment of your creations is a direct act of war in my eyes, and I plan to give humanity what it so desires. His left arm flared a brilliant red light, his chakra erupting to the likes of which surpassed the bijou. I will declare war on them, and then I will wash away the sin that is humanity with speed that might even surpass his mortal father's. His brother rushed him, his left arm ablaze with purine chakra. The burning fist met his mechanized one, and his armor creaked and cracked under the pressure. With a grunt of effort, he pushed his brother to the side, only to be bombarded by an assault of speedy strikes. With his eyes he could decipher what his brother was doing, using the Hyuga clan's Juken. Are we? He asked while he simultaneously dodged the almost lightning-fast assault. He smirked. Did your host really know so much about the sacred form your descendants created? That comment slowed him, but only for a moment. A moment was all Hagoromo needed. With only a thought, his right arm shifted, turning into a cannon-like contraption building a ridiculously large amount of pure yang chakra. In a matter of seconds, Hamura was blasted away by a bright, powerful flash of blue, landing a considerable distance away. Hamura coughed the blast of raw life, ironically injuring him. Why are you still trying to deceive yourself, brother? Hagoromo asked. He had a knowing look on his face. You and I both know you still care for humanity. We both know you believe that individuals can't be forsaken for a larger group of fools. He wouldn't say her name again, but he was sure that his brother got the message. Lilith was a member of a species he helped wipe off the face of the earth, and yet he loved her. Otsutsuki Hamura had only loved one woman in his long life, and that woman happened to be a demon, the very first demon your eyes may see souls. He raised his hand, his palm facing up. But with my eyes, his father had taught him this ingenious technique. I see everything. Hamura had no time to react, no time to counter. The purple sphere of grinding yin-yang chakra was slammed into his stomach. Rasengan, he shouted his father's legacy loud enough for all of creation to hear. The name of the Yandame Hokage's jutsu would echo in the room of beginnings for all eternity, taking massive damage from the technique he had never heard or seen of before. Hamura did the only thing he could do. He activated the eyes that allowed him to stand as equals with his brother. Suddenly Hamura's Byakugan vanished, replaced by brilliant cyan eyes, a darker blue pupil in the center. So you unleashed the Tensigen? Hagoromo started before giving a small smirk. Good. With impossible speed he absorbed the natural energy that naturally flowed throughout the room of beginnings. With the Tensigen, Hamura could tell just how much of the world's energy his brother was absorbing, but he stubbornly held his ground. Let us end this, Hamura, he spoke. Hamura just nodded, his entire body lighting up in cyan flame. His Tensigen chakra mode now activated. This was his most powerful weapon, his most powerful form. He had fought demons, gods, and men alike in this form, and never before had any being survived. All had fallen to this powerful form, all but his brother. That is, before his very eyes. Kurama, his brother's most powerful creation, appeared in the room of beginnings, a snarl on his face. Determination to protect his father lit his eyes, and his chakra slowly encased Hagoromo's body, doubling, tripling, quadrupling, and then quintupling his brother's already monstrous chakra in mere seconds. 9 boiling tails swung to and fro behind him. The absolutely titanic chakra flowing through the room would have outright killed lesser beings. Even Kurama, the mighty Kyuubi, was struggling to keep his wits about him. His mind was in a fog, lost in the power and the absolutely delicious aura. It wasn't every day one was allowed to feel the presence of gods in such close proximity. Hamura's left arm burst into red flame, adding to the cyan that flickered on his body. His power now at its absolute max. That's when his brother did something he always counted as cheating. His left arm burst into red flame, his right into blue. He wasn't at his max, just scratching the surface actually, but it was all the power he could summon without using that. He didn't wish to kill his brother, he just wished to beat some sense into him. They shared a single look before they dashed at each other, Kurama roaring behind his father, sending him as much chakra as he possibly could. Hamura laid on his back, panting, thoroughly defeated. Okay, he smirked. I needed that. He knew his host body was too arrogant, too angry to allow him to think straight, which was why his brother had beaten some sense into him. He could now accept that fate wasn't his master, that he and he alone could forge his future. He knew he couldn't abandon humanity, but he knew he couldn't simply forgive them. I'm glad you finally see the reason, Hagoromo said. He was slightly panting as well, but nowhere near as exhausted as his little brother was. A short silence followed before Hamura asked the question he had been too stubborn to ask. Those thoughts that scare you, he spoke in a low tone. What are they? Hagoromo's eyes looked down in something akin to shame. I wonder if mother had been right. That simple sentence was enough for Hamura to sit upright, his eyes wide. What? He asked in shock and confusion. He shook His head mother had also brought peace to the lands, but that too only lasted for so long. He looked his brother in the eye. Had our mother seen humanity for what it truly was? Had she determined that the only way to save them and the world was to subjugate them? Had she come to the conclusion that the Mugen Tsukuyomi was here? He gulped. Humanity's only salvation. The very words sent chills down his back. Hamura was silent, a wide-eyed frozen look marring his face. It made sense. So what do we do? He whispered, not trusting his own mind. How could he see such a dark, foul means to an end as a viable option? I do not know. He looked to his brother. That's what I need your help for. He let out a disturbed sigh. I no longer know what the true answer to peace is. He shook his head. Humanity will always seek out the capital vices. Saligia, Hamura stated. Saligia. Hagoromo echoed, nodding his head. I will walk with you, brother. He stood. We will find the right path together. Hagoromo smiled when Hamura put a hand on his shoulder. It is time we changed the world again. Time skip in his mindscape. Naruto reigned supreme. He may not be at his full potential in the real world, but here he was very powerful. Of course he wasn't as powerful as he was in his previous life's prime, but he was not to be taken lightly within the confines of his own mind. So when he was breathing heavily, his entire body, which was just a mental manifestation of his true self, was exhausted. He had never been pushed so far before in his life, and the fact that his opponent hadn't even broken a sweat only irked him more. His mortal father Namake's Minato was hailed as the greatest Konoha-born shinobi ever, surpassing his predecessors in most aspects of the shinobi arts. He was a man who despised war and death, but when it came to ensuring the peace of any kind, he would and very easily could slaughter thousands in the blink of an eye. This man before him, a modified kunai in his hand, was by far the most powerful mortal he had ever faced. Sparring with his father was a normal occurrence. He had to increase his strength as much as possible if their plans were going to work, and there wasn't a better teacher than the Yellow Flash. He still trained with Itachi and now Neji every day as well, but the extra lessons couldn't hurt. No, they did hurt, but they were worth it. He had already been taught his favorite shinobi technique. The Rasengan was so reminiscent to his children's Bijudama, as they had taken to calling it, and apparently his father had created the Rasengan by studying the Bijudama, which was simply brilliant. His father was a genius. His skill in ninjutsu, genjutsu and taijutsu were on a level not many could even fathom. Watching his father, he couldn't help but to gradually see the beauty in shinobi techniques. In the hands of shinobi, they were ugly tools for chaos and destruction, but in the hands of the peace seekers, they could be something else, something marvelous. He had been of the opinion, just like Neji had been when he first woke, that ninjutsu was inherently evil, but that was the farthest thing from the truth. Yes, it was born from the corruption of ninju, but said corruption was the intentions of men, not ninjutsu itself. It was somewhat fascinating how many different forms and styles of ninjutsu that existed. There were so many different kinds that learning all of them was impossible, and they only increased in number. New techniques and styles being created all the time, and with the Rinnegan he could learn them all. It really was an exciting thought. Off to the side, Kushina sat in the long grass that covered their newest home. It really was strange actually living inside her son with her husband and a giant being of chakra. All of that was unimportant though, because she was able to be with her child, whoever he turned out to be. She didn't care who he was or what he'd become. He was still hers. She carried him for 9 months. She gave birth to him. Uzumaki Naruto was her baby, her child, and no one could ever convince her otherwise. In a flash of light, her husband and child began a newfound vigor in their strikes. She could only smile as she watched them go at it. They were both so talented, so skillful. It was like they were in an eternal dance of beauty and death. Their moves were calculated. Nothing was ever by accident. He's only 8, but he's already so strong, she said out loud to no one but herself. Suddenly a deep chuckling was heard from her side. She looked at the giant face of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. No, he had a name. She looked at Kurama with a curious expression, her delicate eyebrow raised in a questioning manner. Kurama noticed her questioning look and decided to answer. He's holding back, he explained as a smirk that was of the utmost sinister kind found its way onto his features. Kushina brushed off the demonic smile, knowing that the fox would never harm her. His father was her son, and no matter how much he was loved, Kurama would be in extreme trouble if he ever struck his parents. Of course he is. Naruto is only 8. If Minato didn't hold back. Kushina was interrupted by another set of chuckles from her grandson. I wasn't talking about the Yondaime. And with those words said, Kushina watched the spar with a new fascination. Just how powerful was her son? Naruto waited patiently outside the Shinobi Academy, his back against the tree that sat next to the entrance. His eyes were closed and his mind was somewhere else. When he heard the sounds of children, his eyes slowly opened, his consciousness returning to the mortal plane. His mind was akin to a separate dimension, so every time he entered his mindscape he was essentially entering a pocket dimension of his own creation. Students began to leave the building, the older ones first, followed by the youngest. Naruto easily picked out who he was looking for. Walking up to his brother, he smiled. Neji, he greeted Naruto. Neji greeted Back somewhat strangely, he was still getting used to the idea that not only himself but his brother as well had different names, different faces, and different parents. It was confusing at times, but he was slowly conditioning himself to this era. It had only been 3 days, and already he had accustomed himself to Konoha and her teachings. His host already having memories and cohesive thoughts was a huge factor in that, but Naruto knew that his brother was always one to adapt fast. His learning rate was astonishing, and his genius far outstripped his own when it came to the finer arts. Maybe that was why he was so talented in what this era called Fuinjutsu. "How was your day, brother?" he asked. He didn't care what other people thought. He would sooner cut off his limbs than not recognize him as his brother. Even in new form, they would always be siblings. Neji gave a faint smirk with Itachi's request. "I take the pre-exam tomorrow." He crossed his arms. "Apparently the academy wants to make sure I'm up to par with my studies before they even let me take the Genin exam." He shook his head. His host had known the majority of the curriculum the academy taught, and in only 2 days and his brother's assistance he had learned everything all Genin were supposed to know. A random request from someone of Itachi's political stance, and Neji was already on his way from leaving the annoying confines of the academy. "Good." Naruto nodded. "You'll ace the pre-exam, and then the real one." He put his hands to his chin in a thinking pose. "If everything stays on track, we should be able to start our plans sooner than I thought." The two were brought out of their private conversation as a young voice was heard. "Naruto-san!" An 8-year-old Sasuke shouted as he rushed at the two people he knew weren't really kids. He was young, but he was very smart, and when he learned who the two really were, he had kept his promise of not telling another soul. Neji narrowed his eyes at the child running towards them. His Byakugan activated. "You forgot to mention that you knew Indrakuin's transmigrant brother," he whispered. Naruto sighed. "Of course he couldn't hide that from him. We will discuss it at a later time, Neji," he replied shortly. Sasuke was now in front of the two with a giant smile on his face. "Where's Itachi and I?" he asked in an excited voice. "On a mission," Naruto answered. "Would you like to walk with us?" he asked. They were headed for the Hyuga compound, but they'd passed the Uchihas on their way. "Hi!" Sasuke shouted with happiness. He loved being around his brother's friends. With a slightly irritated look, Neji sighed and began walking alongside the two, watching as the villagers shot less than pleasant looks at his brother. Hating a child for what he has no control of was sickening, and Neji doubted he'd ever forgive them for their treatment of the Jinchuriki. The very word tasted foul on his tongue. "How was your day, Sasuke-kun?" Naruto asked. He wanted to be a part of Sasuke's life. He may have absorbed all of Indra's chakra, ending the cycle forever, but the soul of his eldest son still resided in Uchiha Sasuke. He wouldn't ignore Indra any longer. He would show him that he cared about him still, even after everything he had done. "It was alright," Sasuke began. "Girls are strange, aren't they, Sennin-sama?" he asked in a childish tone, using his preferred way to address the great sage of 6 paths. At this both Neji and Naruto laughed. It was the kind of laugh that brought attention to them. It was that loud they hadn't laughed so hard in a long time. It wasn't even that funny, but the innocence behind the question was heartening. "That they are, Sasuke-kun, that they are," Naruto replied. He turned to his brother, finding a look of longing on his face. He knew his brother loved Lilith. That's why she was spared during the Great Purge. "There's this really bossy girl named Ino, and she constantly stares at me." Sasuke shivered. "It's creepy." Naruto just smiled at this, letting his brother keep his silence for now. "Girls usually do that when they like you," he started, "or are extremely upset with you." He chuckled, a humorless chuckle. "Yeah, girls really are strange," he finished, remembering how confusing Suki could be at times. Neji, however, was lost in memories of another time when he first met the woman he had loved with a passion he knew not he had at the time. When she was in his arms, he would become the most loving, doting man in the world. She had all but carved her way into his heart, and when he finally accepted it, he hadn't loved anything else as much as he loved her. It was complete and total chaos. There hadn't been a war of this kind in a long time, and the death and suffering that littered the battlefield was stifling. The ground was stained red and black, the blood of human and demon alike coating the earth in a cacophony of grotesque colors. Himura looked to his left where his brother's eyes gazed upon the sad sight. The woman to his left, Tsukuyami, doing the same. Hagoromo watched as countless lives were lost as humanity finally stood their ground. This was the Second Crusade, and it was even more brutal than its predecessor. Neither of them had ever seen demons such as these. They held no chakra, but something sinister, something false. The way they moved, the way they took down their enemies was evidence enough. They were not demons of this realm. "These demons are not of this realm," San Amira stated his conclusion, never taking his eyes off the slaughter below them. They were settled upon a high cliff, observing the entire war zone. With both pity and anger, he hated bringing up their origin, but it had to be done at the moment. "Are you sure we can involve ourselves immediately?" He regretted saying those words, for his brother looked at him in a way that made fear wash over him. "Of course we are obligated to involve ourselves." Himura Hagoromo spat. "Our mission is to safeguard humanity from evil. Bringing up Project Cometh Peace was never a pleasant thing. Just because it is evil from another realm does not make it evil of which we can turn a blind eye from. He waved his hand to the battle that had waged for many days, his eyes hardening. Look brother, he started, your eyes can see farther than mine, in more detail than mine. He gestured for him to look. Tell me what you see, what your true eyes perceive. Ignoring Tsukuyomi's questioning look, he activated his eyes, and the sight brought pain to his heart. It was murder. He may be socially cold, in a facade of calm stoicism may mar his face constantly, but he was just as emotionally connected to the world and all of its creatures as his brother was. And when he saw the amount of life that was lost with his powerful eyes, his entire being shook. Himura went silent, a white-hot rage taking his person like a tidal wave. What is going on here, Hagoromo? Tsukuyomi asked. The time she had spent with the brothers had been a time of wonder and learning. They taught her things she knew no other beings could even fathom, and she had seen beauty in a new kind of light. But there were times like this when she saw the worst kind of ugliness. What is this talk of demons from another realm? She was getting suspicious. How do they know about the existence of realms beside their own? If they were correct, she would have to contact her divine family, for they were the ones to deal with incursions from other realities. These two, no matter how powerful or knowledgeable, should not be. This informed, you still underestimate us. Tsukuyomi. Himura whispered, the matters of humanity are well within our jurisdiction. The goddess looked at the man with a look that questioned his sanity. And who, pray tell, gave you this jurisdiction you speak of? She asked. The very being who carved her true name into my flesh, Himura stated. Kami, the divine Hagoromo finished, taking in a deep breath. There are secrets even you deities know not. He looked at her through the corner of his eye before turning back to his brother. Himura, you will speak with the one responsible for this. His demeanor changed, taking a more dominate feel. You ask them to retreat nicely. He then took another deep breath, and the energy of the world flowed into his body at an astonishing rate. With their eyes, Tsukuyomi and Himura could see the mother's gift fortify his body and merge with his chakra, increasing his already nigh omnipotent power. And if they refuse, I will make them leave. With that said, Hagoromo disappeared with no signs that he was ever even there, taking Tsukuyomi with him. Himura took in a deep breath as well, the mother's gift rushing into his body at a slightly slower rate, his chakra humming in appreciation. With his eyes still activated, he vanished from the cliff, his all-seeing orbs already finding what he presumed to be the general of this otherworldly horde. He reappeared in what seemed to be the demonic horde's base camp, and he was suddenly faced with hundreds of the sinister beings, all wearing strange metal-like armor, their eyes a dark cold black. He spoke. I am here to meet with your leader, he stated in a calm voice, not showing the fear that one should have felt surrounded by so many evil beings. Their response was typical and expected. With monstrous roars, a handful of the evil creatures rushed at him, intent on ending his life. Foolish insects, the whole lot of them, with a speed that even their eyes could not see. Every demonic soldier that dared raise their sword at him fell, their bodies cut asunder. It had been too fast for them to see what had even happened, and again their response was predictable. He was about to slash the foolish demons once more, his hand already on the hilt of Kusanagi, when a melodious voice rang out, stopping the incoming assault. Enough, the obvious female voice held a certain authority to it, because when her words reached the ears of the brutes that were about to join their brothers in death, they froze. Can't you see that attacking this man is a foolish endeavor? From the horde of large brutish demons appeared a very beautiful woman. Her white clothing was very revealing, low-cut and seductive, showing off an almost scandalous amount of creamy dusky skin. Her hair was stunning silver and her eyes were almost glowing with a pleasing azure. Himura could tell that this woman's beauty alone was dangerous. I take it you are the one leading this horde of demons against the humans, he asked the breathtakingly beautiful woman, his voice calm and his face not betraying how uncomfortable this woman made him. There was something about her that he couldn't quite tell yet, but there was something about this woman that made him curious. That I am the woman answered respectfully, lowering her head slightly to greet the man who sent 6 of her own personal guard to an early death, like it was child's play. My name is Lilith, the sinful demon queen of the 9 hells, she announced, smugly smirking at the rather handsome man before her. And you are, she asked curiously. Himura stared into those alluring azure eyes, smirking slightly as he realized she was trying to seduce him with her voice. This woman was dangerous. Ordinary men would have bowed down to her, ready to kill their own kin to simply kiss her feet. Her seducing charm was indeed powerful. Too bad for her, though, that he was no ordinary man. I am Otsutsuki Himura, a knight of Kami, guardian of humanity, he intoned his official status. The woman raised a delicate eyebrow, the simple act expressing a beauty that he thought only his mother had possessed. Otsutsuki, she echoed the name, tasting it in her mouth. Where have I heard that before, she asked. Himura smiled. My brother, he began, is Otsutsuki Hagoromo, the sage of 6 paths, he stated, his brother's official moniker given to him shortly after Tsukuyomi joined them in their travels. At the statement, Lilith's eyes widened slightly before she pushed her slight shock down. In an impressive show of emotional mastery, the sage of 6 paths, she started. I have Heard of that man? She looked him up and down. You as well, divine swordsman. Hamura didn't particularly like his moniker, but that was of little importance. I will be honest, she purred, her voice becoming very soft and silky. You are everything I expected, very handsome and an aura that radiates power that is very rare here in the other world. It was true, very few humans possessed chakra. His brother had only shared it with a select few. He had begun his dream spreading his religion he titled Ninshutu. The world, it was only in the beginning stages, but soon he was sure the entire world would know Ninshu. I apologize, but I have not heard of you, Lilith-san, he replied. This woman wished to play nice, so repaying her courtesy with his own was only fair. He was rather good at diplomatic matters such as these, a category his brother did not excel at. Hagoromo's charisma was almost unfair, but when it came to word jousting and subtle undertones, he was not the greatest worry. Not Hamura-san, she replied, the suffix slightly strange and foreign to her. I would not expect you to. After all, I have only entered this world not 5 days ago. While she was speaking, a small table and 2 chairs were summoned for them, giant demons arranging the small meeting table for them. Please sit, she said, pointing to the offered chair. I suppose you wish to speak on behalf of humanity, she asked. She was slightly confused with this man. He was human, yet he wasn't taking a seat. Hamura nodded shortly. Yes, I speak for humanity and our wishes, he answered honestly. Lilith nodded back, a beautiful smile on her beautiful face. Then please let us discuss the extinction of your race, she said sweetly, like she was discussing the weather. Hamura didn't react to the woman's comment, only tilting his head slightly, looking at her with those pure white eyes that seemed to peer into her very soul. The extinction of humanity, he asked amusingly. I would have you know that even without our intervention humanity would not disappear, he started, causing the woman's eyes to narrow slightly. It is impossible. Humanity is in its basic and simplest form a resilient creature. Even when slaughtered in the millions, they will never truly fade from the world, for the world was made for them. His words didn't make any sense, and the fact that she couldn't understand the principles of life and death humored him. Hubris, Lilith-san, he started to come to our world and not even know of the samsara cycle. Instead of an irritated and harsh response, Lilith responded in kind. To know the way your world works would take time, the kind of time that would not allow me to finish what I was tasked with. She kept her cool even under pressure, just like him. He liked that. Just how long would it take to unearth those secrets, Lilith-san? I have already learned your ways in the small amount of time we have been speaking. Yes, the powers he wielded were vast and very, very powerful. Lilith looked at him with a slightly darker expression. That is quite impossible, Hamura-san, she replied. She did not believe him. The faint smirk on his face was not amusing to the Queen of Demons. Is it, he asked with a knowing look. Lilith, molded from clay from your world's god to accompany a man you refused to serve, he began, startling the woman greatly with how easily he spoke of her origins. Lilith, the first woman who would later become the incarnation of lust. She was visibly showing her shock on her face. Now this man, he knew too much. Lilith, the sinful servant of the serpent, wife of Asmodeus, king of demons, prince of hell, the demon of lust. He smiled at her narrowed eyes. Never question what you can't completely understand, Lilith-san, he said. His knowledge of her was scary, but said knowledge was what led her to understand who or what this man was. She smiled, speaking in a way only he would understand, and understand he did. And the word became flesh and dwelt among us, she whispered. Mistake. Suddenly the table they sat at burst into the air, Hamura's chakra exploding, pushing everything around him a few feet away. Lilith was standing, her stance that of a person who was ready to defend or attack at any moment. His power was incredible. She actually had to shield her face with her arms as a surge of raw, powerful energy screamed, pushing at her with a great force. For a split second she could have sworn his entire body was ablaze with cyan flame, letting his chakra that was amplified incredibly by the mother's gift recede back into his tenketsu. He looked at Lilith with eyes of absolute authority. Gone was his polite mannerism, replaced by a dictator-like expression. Call off your army, Lilith, or it will be crushed, he demanded. Lilith scowled. It seemed that she had gone too far. You would threaten me? I have an army that could conquer all 9 levels of hell. You may be powerful, but I doubt you can face us alone without seriously harming the humans that litter the field, she spoke in an angry tone, upset at how someone would ever speak to her like they were her master. She hadn't let Adam command her. What made this man think he would? Who said I was alone? He asked. He had felt his brother's message. The humans were evacuated, leaving only demonic entities on the battlefield. Witness the might of the Sage of Six Paths, he stated, smiling. When it happened, without a second's pause, power so terrifyingly large was brought down upon them all, Hamura being the only one not affected by his brother's all-encompassing chakra. And then something absolutely amazing appeared. The sun was blackened. It seemed as an incredibly large shadow cast over them all. Hamura smirked as he watched Lilith, followed by her people, looked up, dropping their various weapons on the ground with an audible clang of metal from the very heavens. 10 titanic meteors fell, intent on destroying everything. Lilith blinked before turning her gaze back to Hamura, a look of absolute shock marring her face, yet it still was the most beautiful face he had ever seen. So this is the power the other world has at its beck and call. Her tone was soft and accepting. There are 7 of your kind in my world and I doubt all of them combined possess strength such as your brother's, she whispered. Himura scowled. There was nothing in all creation like his brother. Begone Lilith, or my brother, and I will cleanse both worlds of your sinful flesh, he warned the woman once more. Oh, her mass army would perish. They wouldn't let a force of evil this large live in their realm. But Himura, he didn't wish to see this woman dead just yet. There was something he wished to see first. Without preamble, Lilith vanished in a black smoke, rushing away as fast as she could, hoping to survive this nightmare. Her husband, and to a greater degree her master. The words still made her cringe. Even if the title belonged to the serpent, would be very upset. Otsutsuki Himura, there was something odd about him. Within the course of a week a lot of change had occurred for the brothers. Out of time, Niji was an official genin of Konohagakure no Sado. Now he attained a perfect score on both exams just like his brother, and the two were being called prodigies. Such a word was moot to them. The skills a genin was supposed to possess were so insignificant, so useless, that he wondered how anyone with a rank ever survived to see a promotion. When he received his first mission, he understood very well, like his brother, he had to wait for an opening in an already deployed team or until the next batch of academy students graduated until he could be on an official team. Seeing how close the two were, the Hokage had decided to pair them together in a pseudo-like team. They had no sensei, and the only missions they were given were extremely dull ones that had them delivering and filing paperwork for the Sandaime. It was irritating. The only upside the whole thing had was the fact that Naruto and Niji could train most of the day, because their missions may have been many in number, but they didn't take very long. A few hours of unimportant filing and they were off to train their new bodies to the point of exhaustion. It seemed that Niji's host was so talented in the Hyuga's techniques that he was already learning advanced forms with ease. Juken came to him like it had always been a part of him, and the tailor-made fighting style for the Byakugan was very comfortable for him. He had never relied heavily on what this era called taijutsu, always preferring the sword, but he was actually enjoying learning it. Naruto was still training with the Sennin no Mai, which had made Niji chuckle at first, but he was focusing heavily on the ninjutsu side of things, finding the various techniques extremely interesting. His brother had been scary powerful in their time, but with all of these new ways to use chakra, he was a little worried that his brother would become a little too powerful. As it was, Niji could barely stand his ground with Naruto anymore, and it would be impossible. Currently Niji was face to face with Uchiha Itachi, both of their faces that of stoicism. It actually made Naruto laugh. It was like they were looking into a mirror. Begin, the blonde called out, watching as his brother engaged his raven-haired friend. Niji smirked as he rushed in close, his fingers ablaze with chakra. His Byakugan finding the Tenketsu in Itachi's body with a delicate thrust. The genius of the Hyuga clan struck out at the genius of the Uchiha, only for the red-eyed Anbu operative to replace himself with a log, vanishing in a perfect substitute. Itachi was amazing in many ways, the most prominent being his use with Academy or E-ranked ninjutsu. When used by the Uchiha prodigy, E-ranked techniques could be considered A-ranked, for he performed them so fluidly that even Jonin were stumped when he wished to embarrass a shinobi by using genin jutsu against them, and it had that same effect on Niji. With a snarl, the Hyuga boy smirked. Alright then, he started, no holding back. Itachi, he unsheathed the katana that was at his hip, a gift from the Uchiha clan, and smiled, let's see how you fare against my blade. And with that, Niji vanished in a swirl of leaves, a perfect mid-battle shunshin used like child's play, only to appear behind his sparring partner with incredible and almost impossible reflexes. Itachi drew the small tanto from his back, raising it to block the strike. He could not see his instincts moving his body, while Naruto watched the two blades clash, sparks flying. He couldn't help but be enraptured in the sword duel. It was made known that Niji was the superior swordsman. Quite quickly, the black-haired Hyuga was changing the grip of his sword every few seconds, making it impossible to predict his next attack. He was using his sword in ways that would make any of the 7 ninja swordsmen of Kirigakure green with envy. He was fast, precise, and nigh impossible to keep up with. Without his fully matured Sharingan, Itachi knew he wouldn't have lasted as long as he had. With a grace he had never seen before, Niji spun and his body rotated Itachi's until he was almost back to back with him, and his blade was in a reverse grip, the end pressed gently against the Uchiha's neck. If he even breathed wrong, Itachi would be dead, and he knew it. Amazing, the Uchiha whispered. He had never seen such kenjutsu before. Niji was truly gifted in the way of the blade. Alright, Naruto began as he walked out towards the two. They were once again in the private training grounds of the Uchiha's home. I'm next, he smiled, no holding back. You use your sword, and I'll use the ninjutsu Itachi-san has taught me. Niji smiled at his brother's eagerness. He nodded, taking a defensive stance. That was really the only thing one could do when fighting his brother. Begin. Itachi's voice rang out, starting the spar with impressive speed. Naruto pulled 4 shuriken out of his weapon's holster, throwing them all at Niji. With deadly accuracy, the blonde's hands went through seals faster than Niji could comprehend. Fire style. Phoenix Sage Flower Nail Crimson Naruto exhaled fire-infused chakra, the shuriken now ablaze with potent flame, increasing their destructive potential. It was clever, Niji decided. He raised his blade, pointing it at the general direction of the incoming fiery projectiles. He then began to spin, chakra leaking out of his entire body, his blade slicing the air as he spun 8 trigrams, palms revolving. Heaven! With little effort, the flaming projectiles were blocked, bouncing harmlessly off the spinning dome of pure chakra. The moment he stopped spinning, he felt an incredible heat above him, snapping his head to the sky. He saw his brother take a deep breath and then let loose a massive ball of fire so large that it seemed impossible to dodge. Fire style. Great Fireball Technique. TCH Niji gripped his blade, smirking, funneling chakra into the highly conductive steel. He swiped at the air between him and the ridiculously huge ball of flame. When nature chakra roared, and instead of making the flames stronger, cut the technique in half, fire falling to either side of him harmlessly. Naruto, however, was not done with speed that no genin should be capable of. He was crouched in front of his brother, a ball of grinding chakra clutched in his hand. The violently spinning Rasengan was absolutely brilliant, but Niji had already seen it once. Rasengan! Naruto shouted as he drove his father's technique at his brother, knowing that even at full power Niji wouldn't be fatally harmed. They needed to push each other like this, or they would never reach maximum strength with their new bodies. As the Rasengan rushed at his abdomen, Niji smirked, his own hand rushing at his brother's. What happened next surprised even Itachi, as Niji caught the spinning sphere in his palm, his chakra matching his brother's so closely that even with his Sharingan, he, the Uchiha Anbu agent, couldn't decipher which was which. Such mastery, such intimate knowledge of another's chakra, it should have been impossible. The chakra assaulting it on both sides. The Rasengan vanished. Niji had just cancelled an A-rank ninjutsu created by the legendary Yondaime Hokage before Naruto could react. 2 fingers alight with red chakra descended upon him, ready to end the fight for good. It was over. Suddenly Niji felt a surge of energy, and he could see Naruto's chakra rush to his eyes. Mere inches from Uzumaki's flesh, Niji's entire body froze, as if something was halting his movements entirely. Shinra Tensei, he heard his brother whisper. He narrowed his eyes. He knew what came next. With a not-so-gentle force, the Hyuga was sent flying across the training ground, and then he stopped mid-air like something had caught him. Bansho Tenin! The words were whispered again, but all present heard them clearly. With another incredible force, Niji was flung back to his brother's outstretched hand and stopped. When the blonde's palm touched his forehead, it was over. Niji huffed, annoyed at how easily he had fallen into his brother's techniques. Cheater! Niji mumbled. You're not supposed to use the Rinnegan when we spar. We don't need to train our old techniques, we need to train in new ones. Using the Rinnegan defeats the purpose. Naruto smirked. Oh, he asked. Then why did you use Ninshu to cancel my Rasengan? He asked, amusingly chuckling when his brother looked away with an expression of a child who had been caught in the act of doing something he knew he wasn't supposed to be doing. Whatever, he replied. He wouldn't defend his actions, so he just dropped it. So that was Ninshu? Itachi asked curiously. I thought Ninshu was just a way of communication, though nothing else. He stated his confusion. Whoever told you that? Naruto asked. He never said such a thing. I just figured, since I couldn't really see any offensive or defensive purposes, or supplementary for that matter. Niji laughed at the boy's ignorance. Itachi, he began. In our time there was no ninjutsu, taijutsu, or jinjutsu, he explained. Ninshu was forged in the crucible of combat. It was created by my brother to protect us. Itachi listened with increasing fascination. Ninjutsu is inferior to Ninshu in every aspect. The only reason I see why ninjutsu was created is for simplicity. Ninshu is somewhat hard to grasp, abstract, if you will. It takes many years to learn what Ninshu can truly accomplish, whereas ninjutsu takes half the time. How is it superior though? Itachi asked. I can't imagine the offensive techniques would be very impressive, seeing as how it was created for peace rather than chaos. Naruto smiled. You have already learned about one man who used Ninshu. Little dragon, he stated. Itachi raised an eyebrow. Senju Hashirama Wilder of the Mokuton was a user of Ninshu. Itachi's eyes widened. Niji smiled as his brother went into detail of how the Shodai Hokage used Ninshu. Niji scoffed. Of course he used Ninshu, he was a sage after all. The mother's gift only answered to those who had an affinity for Ninshu. And Mokuton, which used life energy, was a Ninshu technique. Sage mode was a clever name for it, probably derived throughout history from his brother's moniker. It's strange how facts become legend with time, and all the change was a little confusing. The mother's gift, which was named to honor Mother Nature for assisting in their plight, was now called natural energy. It was appropriate, but then again it wasn't. Then there was ninjutsu, but he had been able to look past that. Now so many things had been forgotten or changed, and he wasn't sure how he felt about it. Niji's smile faded. No, he wasn't happy she wasn't here with him, so how could he be? He missed her. He had become a savage. That was the only way he could describe himself as he met the rhythm of the woman beneath him. He had never felt such raw pleasure before in his life. This temptation, the temptation to forget everything else, and just stay like this forever, was overwhelming. Everything about it was intoxicating. Her scent, her smooth flesh, her incredibly tight inner walls, her screams of ecstasy, her nails digging into his back, her absolutely hot breath hitting his neck, her legs wrapped around his waist like a lifeline. Everything was intoxicating, addicting, hypnotizing. He didn't want to stop ever, so he didn't. He kept going, kept thrusting like he was a beast. This was not the first time a scene like this had happened, and it most likely would not be the last, no matter what either of them swore in the complete darkness of the night sky, the only light available being the fire he had set before she arrived. Otsutsuki Himura, a pure knight of Kami, lost himself in the flesh of Lilith, the sinful queen of demons. Everything else was drowned out by the sounds of their moaning, their screams, scaring off all wildlife as they succumbed to their carnal desires, and nothing had ever felt so good for the both of them after they first met. After his brother had destroyed her entire army, Lilith had fled, terrified of the might of the Sage of Six Paths. Everything she had heard of the man had been proven true. She had disregarded all the rumors of his prowess like a fool, and she had paid the consequence when they were finished with ending the Second Crusade. Himura was tasked with handling something for a human kingdom in the west, while Hagoromo was needed in the east. They didn't split up often, but they did on occasion when it was needed, so Himura had set off to the west, and very shortly he had met the demon he spared. Lilith, her name was. He knew it hadn't been a coincidence that they met so quickly after he had spared her, but he didn't much care. Of course, the woman attacked him foolishly, thinking that she was capable of taking him alone. Her attack was fruitless, and he had defeated her within a day. She was surprisingly more powerful than he had given her credit for. She lay on the earth ready to be delivered the finishing blow, but was surprised when nothing came. He had left, sparing her once again. He was so strange. She was his enemy, and yet he kept choosing to let her live. It irritated her to no end. She couldn't stop thinking about him, his pale eyes, his creamy fair skin, his noble horns, his tall stature. Everything about the man really pissed her off. She was the incarnation of lust. No one should be able to make her feel this way. He couldn't stop thinking about her, her azure eyes, her creamy dusky skin, her small button nose, her outstanding curves. Everything about the woman really irritated him. He was a knight of the divine. No one should be able to tempt him, so yet he had. When next they had met, it had been in the dark of night. Lilith had literally just walked up to him, standing over him as he sat at the small fire he had made, staring at him with incomprehensible eyes. What had happened next had been a sloppy, lust-filled game of dominance, the two enjoying the other's flesh with no small amount of delight. It had all started that night. The empty promises of this was the last time, and it means nothing. The late night trysts, everything. It was the first time he truly feared his brother, because he knew that if Hagoromo discovered his guilty pleasure involving a demon, he would surely strike Lilith down with no mercy. And despite what he swore, he had already begun to. He gasped for air, the beauty beneath him doing the same, their previous activity coming to an end. They were covered in sweat, and their bodies were too hot to feel the chill from the night air. He collapsed beside her, exhaustion taking over his, for he could push past the feeling of tiredness, but he didn't particularly wish to. He was content with the feeling at the moment. I still cannot believe I was the first man to enjoy this, he said out loud. Lilith chuckled slightly. Before you there wasn't a man alive I deemed worthy to enjoy my womanhood, she stated with no sign of shame. And your brother is too scary. I'm not that brave, she chuckled again. He ignored her, fancying his brother. Most women did, but he knew that there was something going on between him and that goddess. There were no words between the two, but Himura received the message from him. His brother was interested, so he was not. End of discussion. It was most humorous when it came to that. Tsukuyami Hagoromo became a possessive man. He didn't like it when other men appreciated her body, even though it was a compliment. That may be true, but you are the incarnation of lust, are you not? He asked in a curious voice. The woman radiated lust, like her presence alone was enough to make others want to push her down and take her right then and there. No matter the audience, he himself had those urges, but he was the master of his body. His desires could be pushed aside with a single thought, and he had resisted, but he knew without a doubt that any other man, or woman for that matter, would not be able to push her seductive qualities away. They would fall for her charm, and they would be hers forever. Lilith smiled so devilishly that he felt a little uneasy. Yes, well, I've gotten by with playing with women so far, she explained with no shred of embarrassment, but these little trysts of ours have been exceptional. She rose from the ground, ready to depart like usual. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm exhausted, she smirked. This meant nothing, and it will not be happening again, understand, she said without conviction. It was more like a joke than anything. It somewhat meant that was amazing. I'll see You tomorrow night. Understand. In that moment Himura decided enough was enough. Lilith felt a strong hand grasp her wrist, pulling her back down to the ground. She narrowed her eyes at the man pinning her to the ground. Lilith, he started, but said demon snarled, what do you think you are doing? Himura, she shouted at the man. She hated the feeling of being forced, and she knew that she couldn't escape him, which pissed her off. I'm done with this, he whispered, surprising her. I'm done with you leaving every night. I'm done saying this means nothing. I'm done with empty promises. I'm done with it all. What are you? Her words were interrupted when his lips crushed into hers, ending the kiss. His pure white orb stared into hers, a look of love within them. It means something to me. He kissed her again. Just as long. I don't want you to leave. He kissed her once more, and by this time she had stopped struggling, deciding to actually kiss back. I want you to stay by my side, Lilith, he began when they ended another kiss. I know you won't serve a man, and I won't ask you to. He didn't care who or what she was anymore. I'm not asking you to be my servant. I'm asking you to hold my hand and walk side by side with me through everything here. His fingers clasped with hers. Lilith was breathing hard. She had never felt so hot before in her life. What about? She began in a breathless whisper, trying to think with her foggy mind. Asmodeus or Hagoromo? She finally asked. Himura growled slightly. Asmodeus is your husband in title only, and let him come to this realm. Let him try to take you away from me. His eyes narrowed, absolute determination in them as he stared into azure orbs. I'll erase him from existence, he promised with such conviction that it took her breath away. What about your brother? She asked. Hagoromo scared her even more than Asmodeus. He was terrifyingly powerful, and she didn't know if she wanted to let someone in her heart only for them to abandon her for their family. He won't be pleased with me, Himura admitted. She broke eye contact with him. She knew it. He wouldn't defy his brother for someone like her, but that doesn't matter, he continued, shocking her. She met his eyes again. I'll make him understand. I'll make him see. He then showed her a genuine, albeit small smile. Her body felt like it would turn to ash when he spoke his next words, that small smile marring his face as he did so. And if he can't understand, then he will have to kill the both of us. Those were the words that would echo through the demon that fell in love with an angel. Those were the words that would bloom a love that shouldn't have been. Those were the words that would ensure the loyalty of a sinner. Those were the words that would push a woman forward when her husband departed. Those were the words that would drive a wife to watch over her husband's legacy for centuries, observing but never interfering. Those were the words that would 1,000 years later bring a desperate wife to do something forbidden. She did not care about her safety, though she did not care about the consequences. The world was dying, and she loathed humanity for making her love's precious jewel into something so hideous. So yes, she committed a sin after swearing she never would again. Yes, she defied her husband's and brother-in-law's wishes. Yes, she did something unforgivable, but she was not ashamed. She would not apologize or ask for forgiveness, because she knew in her heart that she had done the right thing, the only thing. She had brought back the two most powerful beings she had ever met, and she did so with a smile on her face. They could turn their backs on her, they could condemn her for her crime, they could even kill her, but in the end she would still smile, because she knew that she had did the world a service. She knew that they were the only ones that could fix this shinobi plague. She took in a deep breath, examining her new look. She had never died, so she didn't have to possess a body in this era. What she did have to do, however, was make herself look a lot younger than her adult self, because today was the day she would be reunited with her husband, the only man she had ever given herself to completely. Today was the day she would be held in his arms again, and after so long without that feeling, she was craving it more than life itself. She had stayed faithful the entire time, not even looking at another's flesh. Today was the day she met Uzumaki Naruto, a blonde-haired boy she was still a little wary of, and Hyuga Niji, her husband. Lilith, the sinful, it doesn't fit you anymore, Himura stated as she lay in his arms. Is that so, husband? Lilith had questioned in a sleepy voice, her eyes still closed, enjoying the feeling of his embrace. It is, he replied in a determined voice. No, you are no longer Lilith the sinful, your Otsutsuki. Lilith Heim smiled as she approached the Uchiha compound. What a beautiful sin. It was time skip. Itachi, Naruto, and Niji turned to face an out of breath Sasuke, who was panting in front of the three boys. There was a look on the boy's face that concerned Itachi greatly. Sasuke had sprinted through the house directly towards them in a hurried state, and was now trying to catch his breath to tell them something that, considering his panicked demeanor, was rather important. Aniki, someone is attacking the compound, Sasuke said through heavy breaths, his eyes wide with fear. Nothing like this had ever happened to them, and Sasuke was only an average 7-year-old academy student. Itachi narrowed his eyes in confusion. Where's the intruder, he asked. It was unheard of for someone to specifically attack a single compound, and near impossible for anyone that wasn't at least an A-ranked shinobi. Father and the rest of the corps are trying to stop them at the front gate, Sasuke replied hurriedly. He told me to find you, he finished. It was quite exciting for Sasuke. He felt like finding and informing his brother was a mission, and he swelled With pride that it was a complete one. Let us confront this intruder. Itachi. Naruto finally spoke. He gave his friend a small smile. Itachi nodded. Hi. He replied, grateful that Naruto was coming along. He felt invincible when by the young blonde's side. He felt like nothing could stand in their way. If Naruto truly chose to push through it, he could tell rather easily that the genin was holding back when he sparred, and that little fact really made a difference. Are you coming, brother? The Uzumaki asked. Turning to the Hyuga, Neji just huffed, crossing his arms. Do you really even have to ask? He answered with a knowing smirk. When they first walked the earth, Hagoromo and Amira always fought together. They were history's most powerful duo, most deadly tag team ever. They could fight gods, demons, and everything in between. When they entered battle side by side, Naruto returned his brother's smirk before looking at Sasuke. Protect your Ka-san while we're gone. Okay, can you do this mission for me? He smiled even wider when Sasuke nodded excitedly. Happy to help. Naruto knew that Sasuke was a slightly above average academy student, and that if Fugaku, an experienced jonin, couldn't handle this threat on his own, then Sasuke wouldn't have a chance. But it was more of a way to keep the boy calm than anything, and the fact that Makoto possessed the Mangekyo Sharingan meant that she could protect Indra's incarnation. While he was away, he knew they were technically the same age. Sasuke was actually older by a few months, but every time he looked at the young Uchiha, he could only see his first son. He wasn't going to ignore Indra anymore. It was about time he was a real father, and if that meant being a friend to the next link in the chain, then he would. Hi, I won't let anything happen to Ka-chan, Sasuke stated firmly, determination lighting his onyx eyes like a fire. Naruto smiled and nodded. Good. He then turned to the other two and nodded again. Let's see who would attack Konoha's most powerful clan in broad daylight, shall we? He asked. When he received slight nods, they all vanished in a swirl of leaves. Naruto ran towards the Uchiha compound's front gate alongside Neji and Itachi. The entire situation felt off to Naruto. Why would anyone attack the Uchiha when the sun was up? Doing so would mean that they were ready to take on all of Konoha, and Naruto very much doubted that anyone would want to take on such a task. So what was this person doing? It was strange to say the least. They could see clan members underneath them watching as the shinobi sped overhead. There was quite a few worried looks on their faces when they saw the three of them rushing somewhere, knowing that it couldn't be something good if the great sage and his brother were deployed. As they ran, there was a sudden spike of something wrong, something foul, yet not something familiar. Immediately Neji's eyes widened in recognition, and Naruto could see his brother's chakra surge all around them. That's, he whispered before he literally blasted past them, breaking the sound barrier, shattering the glass of the many buildings that surrounded them. The cries of the frightened Uchiha below them were completely drowned out by the incredible sound of Neji's raw speed, enhanced by the cyan cloak covering his entire body and the powerful Tenseigan greeting the world. Itachi had to cover his face to stand the force behind Neji's speed, something that actually surprised him a great deal. That much raw speed was legendary, and this had been the first time he'd ever seen it. It got him thinking, just what else were these two hiding? Neji, Naruto shouted, but it was too late. His brother was gone. He sighed, looking at Itachi. Hold on to me, he said. Itachi obeyed, immediately grabbing the blonde by the shoulder. Hang on tight, he warned the Uchiha, before he too was gone with another boom, scaring the Uchiha below them. For a second time, Naruto and Neji had decided to not show their true strength and speed to anyone yet, for the simple fact that they never knew who was watching. They lived in a shinobi village. They could be watched by multiple people at any given point. They couldn't afford for others to know just how powerful they were, yet they needed to keep low and build their strength before they were sucked into political squabbles. They didn't have the time to worry about the strength of the village or what other villages thought about them, and if they went and showcased their true strength to the world right now, they'd have to start everything prematurely. That was not something Naruto wished, but he'd rather have an unexpectedly early start than allow his brother to rush into a possibly hostile ploy to get him alone. They were powerful even now, but if they truly had to fight some of the beings that possessed the power whatever was at the front gate possessed, they'd have to resort to rather destructive techniques, and Naruto would rather not destroy an entire village and all its inhabitants. Fugaku panted for breath as he stared at the girl before him. This was absolutely ridiculous. A young girl no older than 12 had shown up at his compound's front gate demanding that she be taken to one Hyuga. Neji, how the girl knew that the young Hyuga was currently within the compound didn't sit well with Fugaku, who had been discussing something with the gate guards. Then, after getting upset that they claimed that there was no Hyuga within their compound, the dusky-skinned girl tried to push past the Uchiha patriarch, her short silver hair bobbing side to side as she did so, and then when one of the guards put a hand on her shoulder to stop her, he was literally thrown into the walls that kept the Uchiha sealed away that had gotten Fugaku to step in. And to his great surprise, she began to attack him. The greatest surprise, however, was that she was actually pushing the skilled patriarch. back with every second they receded into the compound inch by inch, and Fugaku had to wonder just who this girl was. He actually had to resort to ninjutsu when she began to throw around blackish-purple energy at him and the others of the Uchiha police force who had shown up when they felt their commander flare his chakra. The substance that she was using without hand seals no less was corrosive to the touch and was extremely nimble and fast. Even with the Sharingan, Fugaku couldn't see any chakra whatsoever coming from the strange energy, something that confused him greatly. After sending his youngest son, who had been just arrived from the academy, to inform Itachi about what was happening, a considerable battle between the young girl and the Uchiha police force commenced. One that the Uchiha were slowly beginning to lose. Most of his men were already down, but with his Sharingan, Fugaku could tell that none were dead. Thankfully enough, the girl suddenly shouted, throwing her hands into the air. This is trivial. All I ask is to see Hyuga Niji. What is so hard to contemplate about that, you benign fools? The girl's bright azure eyes expressed her annoyance as she glared at the Uchiha head. I am Uchiha Fugaku, and I am the head of the Uchiha clan. You are trespassing on Uchiha property, and you will be punished for your slight against us. You cannot do anything you wish just because you want a little girl. I've already told you that there is no Hyuga in the compound. That seemed to upset the silver-haired girl, because she immediately narrowed her eyes at his words. Little girl, she whispered. Little girl, she suddenly shouted, clenching her hands in anger. I am older than you by at least a millennium. Foolish little boy, she stated in a scary voice that spoke of great power. Suddenly a huge aura of something washed over them, and it threatened to suffocate his very being. It was incredibly large, and Fugaku was sure that this was the end for him. He would die at the hands of this girl in his own compound. And then he felt an even bigger spike of energy behind him. This time it was chakra, and he immediately felt relieved. He knew who it was that flared that chakra. In seconds Hyuga Niji was in front of him, the boy's back towards him. He was safe, he was sure. Why you? Niji whispered breathlessly as he looked at her. She looked just as he remembered, but younger, with shorter hair. Otsutsuki. Lilith smiled at her husband for the first time in literally 1,000 years. It was such a beautiful smile. Hello, husband. Lilith greeted Niji with a tired voice, her eyes tearing up slightly as her hands shook with nervousness and excitement. Niji's chest rose and fell quickly, his breathing labored, his mind foggy. Is it really you? He asked in a tone that prayed to Kami that it was true. Fugaku just stood there silent for the moment before he suddenly turned to see his son and Naruto show up. The moment Lilith saw the blonde, she immediately diverted her eyes to the ground, her nervousness welling up even more. She could say whatever she wanted. She was still and probably would always fear those eyes. This man, no matter what form he took. Niji didn't even realize that Naruto had arrived. So lost he was in the fact that his wife, the only woman he'd ever loved, was standing right in front of him. She was so close that he could touch her. So he did. Niji flung himself at the younger-looking version of his wife, wrapping his arms around her slightly larger frame. He was only 8 and she looked to be around 12, and embraced her. He embraced her the only way he could, and she melted into his arms as if they were the arms of Himura. As if nothing had changed, she could feel his soul, his chakra, his everything, and even though there was another presence in the young body with him, she could feel that Himura was the dominant one. She closed her eyes and sighed in content as his aura enveloped her, wrapping her in a thick blanket that was so familiar. This was the feeling she had craved since he had departed. She missed her husband so much, and she was given her wishes. At that moment Naruto watched the whole thing with indeterminable eyes. Itachi watched his first friend with closely observing eyes, trying to determine if this person who was being embraced like a long-lost lover by Niji was friend or foe. After a few seconds, under the analytical gaze of Itachi's Sharingan, the soon-to-be Xanbu operative concluded that the girl was both friend and foe, which was confusing to Itachi. Just who was this girl, and why did she call Niji husband? It was you, wasn't it, Lilith? Naruto finally spoke, and Itachi visibly flinched. Never before hearing such a strong voice from his friend. The person who spoke was the sage of 6 paths, the mighty soldier of peace, the man who had fought gods and demons alike. This was the person who could strike fear into any man on the planet with just a single whisper. Niji felt Lilith stiffen in his arms, and he let go to stare at her in confusion. He had heard his brother's voice. No one could ignore such a powerful tone, and he felt fear leak off his wife, the likes of which he wasn't okay with. Brother, let me at least be with my wife for a few minutes before you go and accuse her of something, Niji said in an equally powerful voice. Fugaku was actually sweating. How the hell did they sound so terrifyingly powerful with nothing but their voice? The usefulness of chakra-coated vocal cords was many. I asked you a question, Lilith. Naruto spoke again, completely ignoring his brother's words. Answer me, it was you to bring us back, was it not? He asked his question again, and Niji narrowed his eyes at Naruto. He somewhat had a feeling that it was Lilith to bring him back. He felt that familiar feeling of her power when he was brought back. He just didn't know for sure, and he didn't want to upset his brother. But when his wife was talked down to like she was nothing but a simple demon, when she was so much more now, Niji wasn't going to sit by and allow her to be taken from him right after they reunited, even if that meant he'd have to destroy this entire village battling his brother. A man's love for his faithful wife was extremely potent. Yes, Lilith answered before Neji could say anything more. It was me. Naruto's Rinnegan never left her azure eyes, staring at her like she was nothing but his next prey. Lilith sighed. She'd explain everything now and accept her punishment gratefully. She had nothing to be ashamed of. What should I call you now? She asked. I do not wish to be disrespectful. She really didn't know what she should call him. She wasn't sure if he wanted anyone to know his true name, but he could crush her like a bug if she wrongly called him by his name. In this era, Lilith knew that he was a reasonable, understanding man and random acts of violence were not his forte. But ever since the Great Purge, she was terrified of pissing him off. You can call me Uzumaki Naruto. That is the name of the soul you forsook when you brought me back to this world, he stated bluntly, causing the older girl to flinch slightly. Hi, Naruto-san. She took in a deep breath, calming her nerves. She was before her husband, and she would not look like a weak, stereotypical damsel in distress. She was a powerful, capable woman who didn't need to rely on anyone unless she so chose to. When the two of you left the only family I've ever known here, Lilith thought she saw the blonde's expression soften, but she pushed that aside as her imagination. I was heartbroken. I had found the love that I so craved with Himura. I found a place at his side, something I should never have attained. I found a reason to live, and it brought me true happiness. She smiled softly at the back of Niji's head, the boy himself still watching his brother with narrowed eyes. I am well aware of yours and my brother's relationship, Lilith. Get to why you thought it appropriate to forsake the souls of others to bring us back, Naruto stated. Lilith's smile fell. All that disappeared when the two of you left. Our families were torn apart by your sons. The peace I watched you both work so hard to bring was cast aside. Your creations were treated harshly. The corruption of Ninshu. I watched everything fade away into ugliness. Naruto clenched his teeth, and everything I had held dear was lost. I felt empty. It was a struggle to do anything. I was so hurt, but after a while I just couldn't take it anymore. She clenched her fists. I decided to watch over this world, the world that had forsaken your teachings, the world I have grown to loathe. For the desecration of all that I witnessed you two shape with your bare hands, I made sure that nothing came from my own realm. I made sure nothing touched your precious jewel, that nothing tried to slip between thin veil that keeps my birthplace separate from yours. I watched and I wept at what I saw, but I kept my promise to my husband, and I never interfered, not once, no matter how much I wished to. Niji's fists were clenched in white-hot fury. Hearing his wife explain her suffering was something that hurt him more than any wound ever could. Lilith continued. I watched as generation after generation fell into the cycle of war, and I wished nothing more than to wipe them off the face of the planet for what they did. They used a tainted form of your teachings to kill and murder each other. It was sick. I watched as everyone suffered, and after 1,000 years I couldn't just watch anymore. I had to do something. This place is no longer your Garden of Eden. It is an ugly reflection of the beautiful thing it once was. Naruto was silent through all of this, his purple-ringed eyes never leaving her azure orbs. But I am not a creature of peace like the both of you. I am not born for peace, but of the opposite. A demon like me could never hope to take your places, so I did the only thing I could. She was no longer scared. She looked at the blonde with a content smile. I will not apologize or ask for forgiveness because the world needed this necessary evil. I have sinned, but it was a beautiful one in my eyes, and if I am to die by your hands because of it, then I will do so with a smile on my face, because I have finally done something good, and it was on my own. Fugaku and Itachi just stood there taking in everything being said with wide eyes. The things this woman said baffled the Uchiha head and heir, so they stood in silence, partly because they were wary of what the blonde would do, and partly because they wished to hear more. She spoke of the history of the world with every word that left her tongue, and Itachi had originally inherited his desire to study and learn such history from his father. By this time a lot of Uchiha shinobi stood around them from a distance, knowing that they were not to interfere unless they were strictly told to do so. The entire clan knew who Naruto and Neji were, and the respect they felt towards the two was mightier than the will of fire itself. They were close enough to provide support, but far away enough that they couldn't hear their conversation. They could, however, read their lips with their Sharingan, so most of them were also as shocked as the father and son that stood next to them. Lilith never broke eye contact with her brother-in-law, and the content-accepting smile on her face never wavered. She had felt the embrace of her husband for the first time in centuries. Even though it had only lasted a few minutes, those few minutes though had been enough for her. If she were to die this moment, she would die a content woman. That was how strong her love was for her husband. He had changed her very nature. She was a being of chaos and lust, and even though she was still the incarnation of lust, she was no longer purposefully exuding it in an unladylike fashion. It was okay for a woman to be sexy and affectionate, but when it became unsavory and extremely lewd, it was no longer acceptable. All that went away, however, when she and her husband were alone in the comfort of privacy. Himura, who was now named Niji, had forgiven her for all her sins against humanity after proving herself of course and accepted her for what she was. He didn't care if she was a demon or if she had defied her world's god on multiple occasions. In his beautiful alabaster eyes she was the most beautiful, most important thing in all creation, and that feeling, that warmth that it made in her stomach, that was something that was better than all the power, all the money in the world. It was a feeling only Hamura could give her, and it was because of that feeling that he completely held her heart as his own. He had her loyalty, her love, her everything for that feeling, and she would still hold that feeling even in death, as she burned in hell. Even if she were to die by his own blade. All eyes were on Naruto as the 7-year-old just stared at the young-looking Lilith. Before them his face was schooled into perfect stoicism, the kind that put every shinobi to ever live to shame with his mastery of emotions. Itachi, someone who had the analytical prowess of a Kage since he was 7, could not determine what his friend was thinking. The eyes that had gazed upon Kami were the eyes that terrified the beings of the old world, demonic and divine alike. Those were the eyes that Lilith stared into in both defiance and acceptance. She was at peace. Ironically, the seconds turned into minutes, and suddenly Naruto did something that surprised everyone present. He chuckled. "You know," Naruto began as he slowly put on foot in front of the other, taking a step towards his brother and his wife. "I have seen with my very eyes the destruction and defilement humans have brought against this world, and my teachings. I have seen my sons fight over and over for centuries. I have witnessed the fall of our families, and I have seen true pain because of humanity's greed and lust." He was by now in front of his brother, who still had narrowed eyes, his stance that of a shinobi who was prepared for war. Naruto just smiled at his brother, placing a single hand on his shoulder, nodding his head slightly. Itachi saw Niji visibly relax his posture, leaving a defensive stance. "My eyes saw everything even after I departed, and I too, Lilith, have wished to wipe their entire species off the face of the planet." His words were said so easily, so bluntly, that Fugaku and Itachi felt shivers run up and down their spines. Those words were spoken far too calmly, like it would have been an easy task. What they didn't know, or maybe they did and chose not to notice it, an intelligent decision, was that for the Sage of Six Paths the annihilation of every human on the planet was not impossible for him. When Niji received the message, Naruto continued, making his way to Lilith. "I have lost everything because of them. My wife no longer walks the earth, my sons have torn the world asunder time and time over again, and my creations have been imprisoned and enslaved for centuries. My teachings have been abused and mistreated, and the blood of millions is on my hands." It was true, he had given humanity ninshu, which was turned into ninjutsu. He had given humanity a means to kill, and kill they did. They even branded him with a title he would never accept, the god of shinobi. He was not so. Trust me when I say that I understand you more than anyone else. I understand you, Lilith. Naruto now stood directly in front of the silver-haired girl, looking up. Because of the age difference, and everyone could still tell that he was the more powerful even in his childish state. "Kill you, forsake you, banish you. Why would I ever do that to someone who has given me my brother back? Why would I ever do that to someone who was brave enough to bring me back to this world, to save it, even if it could mean their death?" Lilith looked shocked and awed as he spoke to her in such a gentle voice. "No, Lilith, I will not harm you. I have long since done away with my unfair treatment of you. You are my brother's wife, and it's about time you were recognized as much." Lilith looked at Naruto with a confused expression. What she asked before the demoness could even blink. The child of prophecy's arms were wrapped around her, and she hadn't felt so terrified in all her life. But then he spoke. "Thank you, sister." Those were 3 words that Lilith never thought she'd ever hear from his mouth. He accepted her. "I have seen the foolishness of independence both for humanity and myself. I now know that humanity cannot live alone. They are beings that secretly crave order, and when there is no one to enforce that order, they birth chaos. This, however, is not my way." He let his embrace of Lilith go, taking a step back to give her space, which let Niji step beside her, wrapping an arm around her waist. "You said it yourself, I am a being of peace, and even though I wish to subjugate them all, I can't disregard what I think is right, and neither can my brother." It was the absolute truth. Niji believed that Lilith was no longer a sinner. He loved her just as much as Naruto loved his own wife, and he believed that she did not deserve to die by his hands, so much so that Niji would have taken his own brother on in a fight to the last breath. They would have destroyed half the country, but that's how powerful Hamura's love was for his wife, and life and death forever and always was not something the Otsutsuki twins took lightly. They kept their word always, as was their code, a necessary evil. "That is what you said. I am afraid that you can't be any more right than that very statement. This world is corrupt evil, and I need to surround myself with those who can bathe in such evil and never lose the ability to see the light. I need people like you, Lilith." Naruto looked to his little dragon, causing Fugaku to stare at his son in a new fascination. "People like that boy," he said, gesturing to Itachi. "So what will you do, Lilith? Will you aid me and my brother in our quest to change this world in whatever way we possibly can? Will you stay by my brother's side like you swore all those years ago? Will you Be my advisor when it comes to necessary evils. Lilith swallowed hard. She was still shocked at being accepted as actual family by the one person she feared more than the serpent himself. The Otsutsuki name was only ever whispered in her birth realm, stories of a wrathful goddess with long white hair who had literally torn apart the veil that kept the realities separate, slaughtering angels and demons alike until God cast her back into her own realm. The fables she had heard were along the lines of beauty incarnate. The white rabbit appeared smooth-faced, twisted in rage. Even the serpent feared evil. Set foot in her domain. Her first creation cometh to slay. Creator forced to intervene. Creator forced to scream, no one shall set foot in our domain. Her threat was given in the wake of those slain with a single thought and a smile that whispered murderous intent through the terror. In reality, the rabbit goddess went to meet that monster's children, had terrified her, and even though she had come to love one of them, she had been scared of Hagoromo's wrath. Even after his death, there was no doubt in Lilith's mind that the Rikudo Sennin was even more powerful than his mother, and the fact that the rabbit goddess had faced the father of everything in her realm and lived to tell the tale only added to her fear of the woman's son. But now right in front of her, that very terrifying person was asking for her help. She, a demon, a sinful demonic being of lust and chaos, was being asked to help a being of order and peace to help him save the world. It was a little overwhelming, but she pulled herself together enough to give her answer. I have wanted to fix this ugly world for centuries. Brother. Calling him brother was something that felt strange, but not unpleasant. Whatever it is you need of me, merely ask, and I will do everything in my power to assist you. She found her husband's hand, squeezing it in her own. Both of you, I don't want to be alone again. Her last words were said as a hushed whisper, in it caused Niji's heart to ache once more. I will never ask you to do such a thing again, Lilith. We are a family, all the family we've got at the moment. I won't lose any of you to time or anything else ever again. This I promise you. His eyes held such determination that Lilith would be deeply shocked if anything could prove him wrong. Niji nodded at his brother. He'd fight Kami herself before he allowed his wife to feel alone like she did again, and the same went for his brother. Niji would fight alongside him with the confidence he once had now that his wife was once again at his side. It was strange how the woman you love can make you feel invincible, or was that just him?